Hey Wargamer, GW got you down? I know how you feel. I felt that way too. I have a firstborn Space Marine army that I just love. I've worked very hard on them. I've spent a lot of time painting them. I'm a slow painter. It takes me a long time to get something done. And I take a lot of pride in my painting. I do my very best to do a very good job on all of my models. And also, those Marines kind of represent a time and a place in my life. They mean a lot to me, and I love them, and a lot of them have been invalidated, and so I know how you feel. As I absorb social media right now, I can't help but notice that the Custodes players, the Stormcast Eternal players, and the Beastmen of Chaos players are all pretty upset, and they're all upset for different reasons, but I understand the reasons why they're upset. In the case of the Custodes, they have their new rule book, and they're so excited to have it, and it's their new rule book for 10th edition, and it's the only one they're going to get for 3 years, so they do it again. And the players feel as if their army has been diminished to the point where instead of them being the hyper elite army of, just 10, 20 models that are all very powerful and expensive, they'll have to play more models and it'll make them feel more like Space Marines, and that's not what they want. So their issue is that they feel like the identity of how they feel their army should play is lost, and they are upset about it. And then you got those guys who just want to win, and whatever. That's not my bag, but people are upset about their book. And then you had the Stormcast players, and a big chunk of their range was just culled. And it's one thing for me, a Space Marine player, to be upset about when my models go, because a lot of my models are old models. But a lot of those Stormcast kits are not so old. And again, if you're like me, you spend a lot of time painting your models, and you take a lot of pride in them, and they mean something to you. And if you're a Stormcast player, that's gotta be a bother. That's gotta hurt, because before it happens to you, before models in your army get taken away from you, before it happens, as you're building and painting and working, you feel like you are making an investment into the future of your hobby and your gaming. And then after it happens, well, then it feels more like you're paying a subscription to Games Workshop, and that they're just going to keep taking things away from you, and you better keep up or suffer. And don't get me wrong, I'm not here to bag on Games Workshop. I play Warhammer 40,000 whenever I can, but it's less and less nowadays. I would like to play more often, but I don't want to bag on Games Workshop. Games Workshop is the hub of the wheel. It is the language we all speak together. We all talk Warhammer. We can all do it. We can all meet in that common space. But again, there are things that Games Workshop does that are upsetting. But the third faction I want to talk about is the Beastmen of Chaos, who, as I understand it, and stick with me here, because I don't play Fantasy and I don't play Sigmar, but as I understand it, if you're a longtime Beastmen of Chaos player, if you've been with them for a long time, and God bless you, I understand loyalty. If you've been with them a long time, you played Fantasy Battles, and then you had to take your models, cut them off their square bases, put them on round bases so you could play Sigmar, and now you have to cut them off the round bases and put them back on the square bases so you can play Fantasy. And if I were a Beastman of Chaos player, I'd be furious about that. Just furious, because is it so hard for them to write the rules for Age of Sigmar for the Beastmen of Chaos? There are tons of people in the community who would probably do it for free. And Games Workshop, as I understand it, they're bigger than the British fishing industry. You can't pay a couple of guys to play set test some Beastmen of Chaos and write some rules for them. Is it really that hard? And I know what it is. It's sales and marketing and all the business end of it. But I guess that's what I find so upsetting about it. And not just Games Workshop, and just about every business I frequent now, is that the motivation is only ever to make money to please the shareholder, and everything else falls by the wayside. And you might be saying, I live in a very capitalist place, and it comes back to me a lot. Well, isn't that what a business is supposed to do? And, maybe. But maybe we as consumers can start asking more from our businesses. And in order for us to do that, and for order for us to want Games Workshop to be more friendly to their consumer, and by more friendly to their consumer, what I mean is that anyone who builds armies, paints armies, plays the game, does not make the decisions Games Workshop makes, like with Chaos Beastmen or with Stormcast Eternals. People who build and paint models, who love it, would have done whatever they're trying to accomplish there. They would have done it different. And I don't think the people who are making those decisions actually love it. And so if you want Games Workshop to at least pretend to care about you or behave as people who love the hobby would behave, you need to make sure that they have competition. And that's where we come into today's episode of Warsurge Wednesday. And Warsurge is not the only one. One Page Rules is also doing very well. And as we promote these companies and as we play their games, all of a sudden there are less and less people who are relying on Games Workshop for the social fun part of the hobby. Like, Games Workshop's great at making models, and Games Workshop's lore, their setting, the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, it's my favorite. It's where I want to be. It's how they got me. It's why I keep coming back. They got the Emperor, man. They own him, and I love it, and I keep coming back. But I'm often reminded, as I watch Games Workshop do their business as businessmen, I'm often reminded of boxing or MMA, where you have to have independent commissions putting on the fights, because if the fight promoters are also in charge of officiating the fights, then there's tons of room for scandal and fraud. And I feel the same way kind of about Games Workshop, where they make the best models, they have the best setting, they write awesome lore. Can we maybe farm out the rules part of that to a different company? Because the only thing they're motivated by, of course, is selling the next models. And in doing that, they create business practices that, for us, the consumer, really don't feel good. Anyway, again, I'm not trying to bang on Games Workshop, but what I am saying is I have sympathy for the Custodes players, the Stormcast players, the Beastmen players. I have sympathy for you. And that's why, let's talk about how your factions would fit into Warsurge. Again, if you want to get into One Page Rules, they already got it done. You could just go over to their stuff and play some One Page Rules. You could do it today. Warsurge is much the same. If you get on the Warsurge community page where they have the QR codes, they have a Custodes faction. I haven't looked into the Sigmar stuff. I haven't seen it. I don't remember seeing it, but also I haven't deliberately looked at it. I'm not a fantasy guy. I'm not. Elves and dwarves and shields. Elves and dwarves are only cool if you put them in space and give them lasers. Other than that, I'm not into the fantasy side. But anyway, we should sit down and see how these factions could possibly look in the game of Warsurge. Let's do that now. So the first thing we got to think is who are the Custodes? Who are they to me, anyway? Your Custodes may be different to you than they are to me, which is the beauty of a Warsurge game, where you can make them exactly how you want to. I've never played the Custodes. They've never been my army, but I've played against them a bunch. And here's my impression of them. First of all, lions, not wolves. Each Custode is a one-man army. Each Custode is an unkillable god. each custody should be feared. You run from the custodies because you're not going to beat them in close combat. And then the counterplay against them should be that because each one of them is so fantastic that they should have a very small model count on the table. There shouldn't be too many of them. And so you're still going to win your games because you can outposition them, outmaneuver them. If they squander one of their resources, it's a huge hit because they only have so many of them. So that's what I think of when I think custodies. I think lions, unkillable god machines. Now, on the Warsurge community site, which is, you'll find it on the Warsurge website, there's a link to their community page. It's also in the app. In the app, you can link to that community page, and there are QR codes for existing army builds, and they already have the custodies in there. And this build here is taken directly off of that page. I just pulled them right in, and it seems to me that they've done a good job here representing the custodies well, with that defense 5, with that 2-up armor save, that 5-up Aegis save. They're ballers. They're great. And you can see there's only 4 models on this list, and it's already almost 700 points because they're custodies and they're awesome. What you might be missing if you haven't played your first game of Warsurge yet, if you still haven't checked out the rules, is you get both those saves. If you fail your armor save, you go to your Aegis save. That's an Aegis save is very special in Warsurge. And so they're way thuggier. I believe they're way thuggier in this game than they are in the other game. Now, I like what I see here. I think this is cool. But again, I've had my own personal experiences with the custodies, and I would do it different. So here's my custodian list as I have built it, or here's the beginning of my custodian list. I always like to work to 2,000 points because habits. I didn't change much from what the community site gives you, but I'd like to point out the custodians with the storm shields. I've dialed their Aegis save back to a 4-up Aegis save rather than a 3-up Aegis save, and there's a reason for that. Now, being old school Warhammer, I enjoy a storm shield giving its user a 3-up invulnerable save. I always liked that. However, when I used to play the custodians a lot, there was some army rule they had. There was some way to build them, which gave the entire army 1 point of invulnerable save better. And so they ended up like the whole army had a 4-up invulnerable save. And I wanted to do that again here. So what I've done is at the bottom of the list, there's the Vexillus Praetor. He's the guy with the banner, and one of his perks is Presence. Presence is a table-wide army buff. So as long as he is alive and on the table, every unit on the table gets that buff. And the buff I gave him is the Shielding Aura, which makes everybody's Aegis save 1 point better. And it costs like 200 points to do it. But what that does is everybody who has a 5-up Aegis save now has a 4, and anybody who has a 4 now has a 3. And that's why I dialed that 3 back, because if I would have left it as a 3, now he would have a 2, and a 2-up Aegis save is a little bit too much. Because you don't want to be a jerk, right? And the other thing I like about it is you put the presence on the Vexilla rather than just improving everybody's Aegis save, and then that gives some counterplay to your opponent. Like your opponent can target the Vexilla to make killing the rest of your army easier, but also what it can do is it can allow you as the player to use the Vexilla as bait in certain situations where you think bait would be cool. So that's a small change I made. And then I also, they didn't have it in the list, I built from scratch the Telemon Dreadnought, because you got to have a Telemon Dreadnought. And what did I do with him? Well, he moves 8, he dashes 6. He's defense 9. The Warsurge numbers go way back to like Warhammer 7th edition-ish. And I know like in the modern 10th edition 40k, he'd probably be like toughness 12. But in Warsurge, defense 9 is kind of like toughness 12. I don't want to make him defense 10 because that's the limit. That's as good as it gets. And he's almost there, right? And then I gave him 12 hit points, a 2-up armor save, a 5-up Aegis save. Of course, he'll get a 4-up Aegis save with the benefit of the banner. And then I also gave him tough. And what tough does is he halves damage on the way in. So he's brutal. And then I gave him his fist, which he gets 5 attacks per fist. So he's going to roll 2 dice in close combat. And then the plasma projectors, I gave Cone too, so they're throwing old school teardrop templates. So if you're old timey, you got some teardrop templates, and if you happen to be a new player, a younger person, and you don't have teardrop templates. If you don't have teardrop templates, you can find them online for not very much. I'm sure you can get them on eBay. What is the name of that site that does all the acrylic work? Oh, I almost had it. I might think of that before the video's over. And but you can also cut them out of paper. But the teardrop templates, you put the template down where your model is, and then anybody under the template gets hit. And that's way more fun than rolling dice. So I gave him the templates for his plasma projectors, and I made him a big old brute. And you'll notice he's awesome, and he's going to be hard to kill, and he's going to be super killy himself, but he's also 713 points. But that's cool because he should be, right? He should be. And I don't mind a model being ridiculously expensive as long as, it's appropriate. And here it is. Just like an average custodian, just the regular custodian is 113 points. Fine. I am absolutely fine with that. So anyway, this is what I've done with the custodians, who I could go on about this. I know quite a bit about building me some custodians, but let's talk about the Stormcast Eternal next. Now, I know very little about the Stormcast Eternals. I do not play Age of Sigmar. But as I approached this, as I started looking at it, I was really amazed to find out how many of these models are going, and also how really good a lot of these models look. There's a lot going on here. And if I had all this stuff and I'd painted all this stuff, I'd be bent. I would be really bent, because there's a lot of cool models in this collection. But here's what I know about the Stormcast Eternals. One, they are Space Marine fantasy army. They are fantasy Space Marines. Two, they all can deep strike. Everybody can drop out of the sky. Three, they have like a storm and lightning kind of theme going on. So that's what I'm going to focus on. They are fantasy Space Marines who can deep strike and throw lightning around. And I'm only going to make one profile because, again, I'm not the guy, but I'm going to focus on the Liberator because I believe the Liberators seem to be like the classic model, the one that most says Stormcast. So here's how my take on Stormcast Eternals. All right, I'm going to start reminding everyone that I don't play Sigmar, and I'm not any kind of expert on Stormcast Eternal, but just a little bit I know about them, and looking at the picture, this is what I think a Liberator should be in a game of Warsurge. And if you're familiar with Stormcast, I'm sure you would do it very different. And again, Warsurge is beautiful that way. I really love playing with the app. I play with the app all the time. It's a playground for my imagination. And I have so much fun with it. So what I've done is I've made a fantasy Space Marine. He moves 6. He dashes 6. His defense is 4. He's got 2 hit points, 3 up armor save. I gave him a 4 up Aegis save because he's got that boss-looking shield. And I didn't want to give him a 3 up Aegis save like a Storm Shield because a 3 up Aegis save is really powerful. And I would think of a Liberator as being like a troops choice, like a battle line choice. So I gave him the 4 up Aegis, and that still makes him very thuggy. Now the hammer, I called it a Storm Hammer, and I thought that sounded cool. I gave it 3 attacks at power 5. So it'll wound a defense 4 model on a 3, which is very, Space Marine. And then I gave the weapon electric, and that brings in the elemental effects in Warsurge that I haven't played with at all. Again, I play very casually with my son, which is why you don't get a lot of battle reports. But if you want to go full nerd on Warsurge, full nerd is available for you. There are steps and depths. There is advanced Warsurge, and then there's elemental effects and different status effects and different ways to cure them. Someday, when my life is a little calmer, I would like to go deep on all of that. And maybe when my boy's a little bit older, or if heaven forbid I meet another Warsurge friend. But you have the opportunity to get real deep into this game. I don't, but I threw that on there, that weapon electric, just so we could talk about it. And then the other perks I've given the hammer, Annihilate 1, so it does 2 damage. I didn't put any Penetrate or AP on it. Again, I'm trying to keep the points down. I consider this a battle line unit. And then the other perk I gave it was Chain 2, because I wanted to get that lightning effect in. So what that is every time you cause damage to your opponent, every unit within 6 inches of that opponent, you roll a dice for, and on a 4 up, you get to attack them with the same weapon. And so that's a little fun game to play with your lightning effects on your weapons. And so that's just real quick. That's just me building the Stormcast Eternal real quick. I'm sure that if you have that range and you're looking to get in, you could spend the afternoon building Stormcast in the app. It's easy and it's a lot of fun. Now, before we go today, I also want to say just a little bit about Chaos Beastmen. So I didn't know anything about Beasts of Chaos. I still don't know anything about Beasts of Chaos, but I've heard of them for a long time. I've heard of them as butt of jokes quite a bit, actually. And when I was getting ready to make this video today, this is when I sat and looked at these pictures in particular. And this range is sweet. There's so much cool stuff happening here. And also, if these models are too old, a lot of this stuff holds up really well. A lot of this stuff is really cool looking. And I feel sorry for the Beastmen players, because like if you got a full army of this, I bet you loved it. And I bet you like when you rank it all up on the table, it's gorgeous. I really like a lot of these models. I'm sad for the Beastmen players. But anyway, I cannot begin to tell you how to build a Beast of Chaos army in Warsurge, because I don't know anything about the Beast of Chaos. I could interpret them from the pictures, but what I'm seeing here is massive amounts of flavor, tons of things to tickle the imagination. And if you are a Beast of Chaos player, dude, Warsurge is for you, because there's something for every one of these units. I'm reminded of, there is an aura or a perk you can put on called Bloodthirsty, where every time your unit kills another unit, you add an attack to their weapon. So if you start with 2 attacks, you kill a unit, now you got 3, kill another unit, now you got 4. And I think that's good for this army. I think lots of movement would be cool for this army. Fast units, lots of movement perks. But again, I can't say anything about Chaos Beastmen other than these models are great, and they would be appropriate for Warsurge. Like this Flaming Bull model. This dude's awesome. What could he be on the table? I'd give him like the Juggernaut or the Unstoppable rules or whatever. Just make him a smash machine. And then the Minotaurs, oh my god, I'd make big beat stick Minotaurs. And I'd give them all charge so they'd go racing across the table. Rah! Minotaur. Anyway, Beast of Chaos players, come play some Warsurge. You find the website, warsurge.com. The app costs $1 a month, or you can buy the whole thing forever for less than $20. And, you know, if you're bummed out about your army, try a new game. You know, seriously, it's very inexpensive. The rules are pick up and play. You can download their rules for free, have a rule book printed up. They have a big hardcover rule book out now. I don't have a copy. Someday I will have a copy, but that is available to you. I really think that the game is fun. It's a fun game to play. It's so stress-free. I think that Chaos Beastmen players would have a wonderful time building a wonderful army out of their wonderful models and playing some Warsurge. Anyway, I'm running out of talk. My mouth is stopping now. Thank you for listening to me again on Warsurge Wednesday. I'm hoping to have more battle reports, because battle reports are better. Like, I can talk about it all day, but wouldn't you rather watch it be played? Don't forget to check out Hobby Homies. They're an Australian channel, and they've been doing Warsurge. And if you're into Warsurge, find it there. And thank you very much for listening. I'll be back next week for another Warsurge Wednesday. Happy wargaming, everybody.